Hey guys, welcome back to Relationship Loft TV, the place to be to create a marriage that you love. And today we're going to be answering your questions about emotional regulation. And we're talking about this because it's the number one skill that you must have in life, period, but especially in your marriage. Because if you don't have the skill of emotional regulation, you're screwed. All right. You are screwed because when people don't have the skill to emotionally regulate themselves, they are handicapped and they cannot function like a mature adult because you're essentially hijacked by your limbic system. Okay. You're in an automatic default response. And when you can't function like an adult, you absolutely cannot have a mature and functional marriage, let alone a happy and healthy and bliss-filled one. All right. So we are talking about the proto skill today because this skill has, number one, saved my marriage. Okay. Number two, I've lost over 100 pounds with this skill because this skill is all about impulse control. It's about being self-aware enough to realize that we are in our default automatic nervous system response of instant gratification. Okay. And our thoughts and our emotions are part of that whole system. That is why we were talking about this today, because it's really important. And last week we talked about emotional dysregulation and what being triggered looks like. And so this week we're going to talk about how to emotionally regulate yourself so that you can start to make some traction in your marriage at home with your partner. Okay. All right. So what is emotional regulation? So I think the first thing to mention about emotional regulation is that it is the proto skill. Okay. And I call it the proto skill. We call it the proto skill because our mentor, Dr. Terry Real, calls it the proto skill. And basically all that means is this is the skill above all other skills. Okay. Emotional regulation is the skill above all other skills, meaning unless you get this, the rest does not matter. Truly, the rest does not matter when we're talking about relational skills. You have to learn this skill and you have to start embodying it before any of the other skills are going to work very well for you. And that's the first thing, is that it is the foundational skill of inner work and inner healing. And it's all about self-awareness. Okay. It's about self-awareness and understanding that, hey, I am triggered right now. I am emotional right now. I am taken over by my emotions right now. And I have got to work myself out of this place. And it's really the ability to move yourself out of your automatic emotional trauma responses, AKA your limbic system, and into your calm, mature, present adult brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. So it's the ability to move yourself out of fight or flight, out of subconscious default patterns and programs, which is subconscious mind programming, different part of the brain, and move yourself here. Okay. We get from here to here. All right. And that is what emotional regulation means. It's being self-aware enough to understand where you are and then move yourself from where you are to where you want to be, which is a mature adult.
So essentially what we're saying is you're controlling your emotions when you're in a triggered state. Most of us, we're unaware of these patterns. We're unaware when we're actually triggered. When you're dysregulated, you're responding maybe from a stressful place, from an angry place, from an anxious place. So regulating your emotions means you're dealing with these emotions in real time, working with yourself, working with the emotions, the anger, and you don't let it persist. You don't act from this place of dealing with these emotions. You don't speak these emotions. You don't act angrily at your partner. All right. So you're actually processing these emotions in real time. That's the act of regulating your emotions. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's the ability to stay feeling good and in control of your emotions, despite what's going on outside of you, despite how your partner is behaving, despite the life stuff that's being thrown at you. What emotional regulation does is it allows you to stay calm, feeling good, feeling in control, no matter what is going on. And that is that skill is a priceless skill to have,
right?
Because you can keep your energetic frequency high where you need it to be so that you can, perform at higher levels in your life, in all areas of your life, in your work, in your marriage, as a parent. When we're at these low vibe frequencies, because we're just exhausted constantly from just being triggered, living from an emotional place, we cannot operate at a high level in any area. Okay. And it's a pretty hopeless, helpless feeling. So emotional regulation is the process of processing and feeling your emotions. And like Ned said earlier, it's about learning how to feel your emotions instead of being your emotions. Feeling your emotions is healthy. It's good. Because when we can feel them, we can release them, we can let them go. We can release the people and let them go who've hurt us.
And in doing so, we don't foist these emotions onto our partners. All right. And create a situation where we actually trigger them and elicit that same response from them based on, maybe what they dealt with in their childhood also. So it helps you create a more healing, cherishing, loving, healthy environment for you and your partner. So one of the other questions that we were asked by one of the viewers was, why is it important to learn how to regulate your emotions? Personally, I feel like it's really important that we do this so that we can cultivate healthy relationships with our partner, right? Because a lot of times when we're having issues and we're having challenges, we're acting from these old programs, these subconscious programs. So learning to identify those programs, learning to understand why those programs are there, learning to associate and understand the stories that keep us spinning in these negative places with our partners are very important if we're going to cultivate a healthy relationship with our partners. Also, cultivate just healthy relationships in general. If we're always attaching a negative story to or making negative meaning of something that someone is saying to us, even if they're just giving us instructions, they might just be correcting us around something that we're unaware of. It could be something as simple as that. So we want to be in a place where we can healthfully navigate these emotions because they help us create better relationships with the people around us. Okay, so it's really important. It also allows us to stay calm because when we aren't calm, we can't communicate effectively. We can't listen effectively. All right. And you also can't make really good decisions when you are not emotionally regulated. All right. So these are really important factors, especially as parents, especially as spouses. It's really important that we learn how to do this and regulate our emotions in a very positive way and an effective way because we want to create a biosphere that's healthy for all the people in our environment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when you're triggered and you're activated, you can't be relational because you're not in the mature part of the brain where relating is possible. Two totally different parts of the brain. And that's one of the main things this is one of the first things we teach our clients when they come into work with us is how to switch from the automatic default emotional brain, the habit brain, and how to switch into here and become much more mature and much more relational. That's a huge reason of why it's important to learn how to regulate your emotions. Also, regulating your emotions and processing your emotions, that is the process of the inner healing journey that makes it possible for you to show up in the world as the best version of yourself and show up in your marriage as the best version of yourself and show up as a parent as the best version of yourself, not the wounded inner child, emotionally traumatized version of yourself, but the healed version of yourself who's on the healing path, living at a higher frequency and able to really conquer what it is you came here to conquer and have a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest reason is like, don't you want to be happy in your relationship? Like it's the one thing that affects all the other areas of your life. Yeah. So it's just, it's in my opinion, it's not even optional to learn this skill.
Yeah.
It's a must.
Yeah. Part of our ability to be able to show up in that way is really having a healthy mindset. Okay. And in order for us to do that, that means regulating our emotions also helps us physically and mentally, okay, be able to do these things also healthfully. Because as you and I both know, stress is one of the major factors in creating disease.
Yep.
Okay. So when we're actually dysregulated, we're actually prone to getting ourselves and making ourselves very sick if it's prolonged.
Exactly.
Okay. So we really want to make sure we attune ourselves to being in the highest vibration we can and healthfully regulating these emotions so that we, like you said, we can show up as our best selves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just not healthy to constantly be in a state of being emotionally triggered and in a state of fight or flight, right? It's just not healthy. And when you don't know how to regulate your emotions too, this is why people in marriage have constant cyclical fights and arguments like all the time, because they don't know how to regulate themselves. They don't know how. They don't have the skills. If people had the skills, they wouldn't get in the fights and the arguments that they do. They would know how to maneuver their way through those in a very effective and healthy way.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah. And that actually helps us segue into our next question is, can emotional regulation be taught? You know, Kelly spoke a little bit about this because we do teach our clients how to do this. Everyone can be taught how to do this.
Anyone. Yeah. And everyone should.
Yeah. Yeah, they should be.
Yeah. Everyone should be learning this.
And part of that, yes, everyone can be taught to do this and everyone should be taught to do this.
But they're not.
They aren't. That is the big problem.
Yeah. A lot of our clients come to see us every day and they've been to therapy, they've been to counseling for years, and nobody is teaching people how to do this. Yeah. Nobody. And it's a big problem because people not knowing how to do this is why they are in the situation that they're in.
Exactly.
Because like I said, this is the proto skill. If you don't know how to do this, you're fucked.
Yeah. And it's really an epidemic because part of what we're also talking about here, if it's not being taught culturally, if it's not being taught professionally, academically, if it's not being taught, that means what are we learning? What are we learning as children? You understand what I'm saying?
We're learning to completely be dysfunctional and fight and argue all of the time. Right. And I mean, we know how that is.
Yes.
I mean, we've got 5 teenagers at home who are constantly fighting and arguing.
Yeah.
And we are our children's emotional regulation system. I mean, that is our job as parents. And children mostly don't know how to do this as they get into their adolescent years and become young adults because it was never modeled for them.
Exactly.
So it is our job to help our children regulate themselves, and we must model this for them. And also, if we're with a partner who is not willing to do this kind of work yet with you, alongside you. You starting to learn how to do this will make a huge difference for your partner, because once you're vibrating at a calm, mature level, and that is what you are projecting, you'd be shocked at how your partner starts to show up differently.
Exactly. Yeah. And part of, as you're identifying, whether your partner can do this or not, if you're looking at them, if they're struggling with something like this, there can be several factors that help you understand why that's the case. Because one of those things can be trauma. We deal with trauma as children, but it can cause us to shut down or overreact, right? So if a person is not aware that they have any trauma, or they haven't identified any trauma from their childhood, that may be one of the reasons why they're reacting and responding in the ways that they're responding. Okay. Another one, your emotions may not have been validated as a child also. Okay. Or to show you how to effectively express your emotions, right? Or healthfully express your emotions. Again, we're talking about modeling. If you don't see this as a child, and your adaptation is to just respond from a triggered place, again, you don't usually know these things until you're in relationship, intimate relationship. You may be challenged to implement these skills, even if you're learning. Okay, so it takes some time. That's the other thing I want to say. Yes, you can be taught this, but it's not an overnight. You can't just learn this
over a weekend
and then show up magically and just, be able to do this in a way that's seamless and without any challenge.
Yeah, you have to be taught how to do this by someone who knows how to do it very well.
Exactly.
And you really have to be taught how to do this by someone who is married, who has gotten to the other side of some big challenges, who has found success on the other side. And that's a really big point that I want to make right here, is that whoever you go and get help with for your marriage, you better make damn sure, number one, that person's married. Okay. I don't care if you're seeing a counselor, a therapist, a coach, a psychologist. I don't care. Okay. Who is that person? Are they married? What modalities do they use in their marriage? Have they gotten to the other side of all of the hard things in a marriage? And do they genuinely love each other, love to be around each other, and have a sense of harmony and peace and mutual respect and mutual love in their marriage? Yeah. It's important that you understand if that's the case or not when you're talking about getting someone and investing in someone to help you with your marriage. Yeah. Because if someone is not living what they're teaching you, forget it. Like, it's not going to work. It's not going to help you. Right. You need to find help from someone who knows what they're doing and knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. And so yeah,
it can be taught. Make sure that who's teaching you knows what the hell they're talking about. Okay. Yeah. Best piece of advice I can give you in terms of finding the right help to help you with your challenges. So, can everyone emotionally regulate themselves? The answer is yes. Everybody can do this, unless you're a crazy person, okay, or your partner's a crazy person who belongs locked up somewhere. You can learn how to do this. It's a skill, like any other skill, like learning a new language, like whatever skill, you can learn this. Everyone can learn this. The only people who really can't learn this and do this, they can learn it. We can plant the seeds, but children do not know how to emotionally regulate themselves. We can teach them self-soothing at a young age. We can teach them these things, but we are their emotional regulation system. Children do not have a prefrontal cortex. Okay. That's the part of the brain that's what we call the adult brain, the mature present-based brain. That part of the brain is not fully developed until a person turns between 25 and 30 years old. The 25 to 30 years of age, we know that the prefrontal cortex is fully developed. Okay. And there's consciousness, the full consciousness there. All right. So children are the only ones who, can't do this skill, right? They're babies. They're not fully developed yet. So even into the teen years, they still need us to help be their emotional regulation, which means we have to, learn this skill for our kids.
Yep.
First and foremost.
Yeah. And another important point that we want to make also is, we said children, we have to regulate, we help them regulate their emotions. We model that for them. We show them how to do that. The thing here too is that we as adults, we do this every day in practice. If you go to work every day, you're practicing emotional regulation, because everything at work is not flowers and roses every day. You deal with challenges at work, right? So if you can do this at work, you can do this at home.
Exactly.
Okay. It's really important that people understand that, because a lot of people, especially nowadays with, everybody being diagnosed with so many different things, it becomes a crutch and an excuse for a lot of people not to show up in these ways that they can and they do every day at work, at home.
Yeah.
Okay. So it can be a big excuse for a lot of people. So please be aware and understand that the average person, even with the little trauma, can still show up, be a mature adult, and regulate their emotions around some hard things sometimes.
Yep.
All right. It requires some work, some help a lot of times. Okay. But it can be done.
Yep.
Okay.
It's called skills transference. If you can do it at work, you can do it at home.
Exactly.
All right. So what part of the brain allows us to regulate our emotions? This is a really, really great question. This is going to get a little sciencey, a little nerdy. But the part of the brain that allows us to regulate our emotions is the prefrontal cortex, okay, which is the adult, present, mature brain, right? It's the part of the brain that makes us human, okay? It's what separates us from all the other animals in the animal kingdom. But it is what is responsible for self-awareness and for being present, okay? And we achieve emotional regulation through the prefrontal cortex being activated via breath work and via pattern interruptions of the dominant subconscious programs that are running the show in our lives. Basically, we have to decide, make a decision. And this prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that actually makes the decision, because the subconscious mind is a computer program. It just does what it's told. So we use this to tell this what to do. Exactly. Okay. And so this makes the decision. Hey, I'm making the decision. When I'm triggered, I have a predetermined, I call it a trigger ritual that I do every single time the same way, every single time I get activated. And I'm going to practice this, and I'm going to do it the same way every time. And that is the part of the brain that allows us to make these changes. It's a very powerful part of our minds. And it's our superpower when we choose to allow it to be.
So as important as the prefrontal cortex is, and understanding it and how it works, because it's slow in its development, from our early years up until we turn 30, understand that we're operating from these programs subconsciously. So we've been programmed throughout the years, from our young years, our teenage years, we're in our 20s, up to our 30s. So we're generally operating from the subconscious programs. Okay. That's where these programs are. That's where we're working from, speaking from, reacting from. This is where we are generally living from. All right. So the prefrontal cortex allows us to take control, because the big thing I want to make clear here is that I equate the subconscious and the programs to the immature versions of ourselves. Okay, so that you understand, when you get triggered, You are being a child. You're in a child state.
Exactly.
You're in an immature state, right? Just so that you can know this and understand it now, so that you know that when you get triggered, what it feels like, right? And as a child, you know how children are. They want what they want. So we're, as adults, when we're in that child state, we're no different. We speak like children, we act like children, we respond like children, and we generally don't care what the other person is saying, right? And that keeps us challenged in terms of the communication dynamic, being able to meet obligations a lot of times if we're in that child state. You can't show up maturely, right? You can't do anything maturely from that place.
They think that there's no way to change this dynamic. And it's like, yes, there is. You have the power to totally change this dynamic and turn things around just by learning how to emotionally regulate yourself. It is your superpower, this part of the brain. And it's a decision that we make. I'm going to learn how to do this because I want to feel good in my life and I'm tired of feeling hopeless and powerless. And this skill is the foundational skill that you need to be able to do that and feel that way and feel powerful in your body and not like you're just getting like thrown around by the universe and your partner. It's like, no, like you have the power. You do have the control.
Exactly.
Okay. And don't let anyone tell you any different because you can totally shift the entire trajectory of your marriage just with this one skill alone. And I know that because I've been able to do that. Okay. We both have.
Yes.
So why, and this is such a good question, why is it so damn hard to emotionally regulate ourselves? That's a really good question.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what we just talked about. These programs that live in the subconscious are very, very, very strong. They are like directives in a computer. And unless we know about them, unless we know that they're there,
exactly,
we just operate from them.
Yeah. And most people don't know they're there.
No. And because our brains are consistently and constantly trying to protect us, the subconscious part of the brain, that's what it does. It's in protective mode, right? So anytime we are in a triggered state, fight or flight, our brain pretty much goes offline into the programs and the automatic responses kick in, right? Yeah. So it takes us over.
Yeah.
We get hijacked.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if our subconscious mind exists to protect us and we go into that old familiar dance or dynamic with our partner where we're feeling contempt, we're feeling anger from our partner, which to the subconscious is going to throw up our defense mechanisms. What do you think your subconscious mind is going to protect you from? Your partner.
Yeah.
Right? We are replaying our childhood emotional trauma responses over and over and over again with our partners until we learn how to break out of the old dysfunctional dance with them. Break out of the old story, break out of the old dance, break out of the old energy and the old pattern. That is the hardest part for most people to get, is to come out from underneath that old story and that old energy that they have about their partner. Because as long as you are in the energy of that, the dynamic is just never going to be able to shift. So we've got to learn how to take hold of our own emotional trauma responses and process them and regulate ourselves if we're going to have a healthy marriage. But it's hard. It's hard to do this in the beginning because the programs are so strong.
Yeah.
The subconscious programs are so strong. What was modeled for us growing up, it is so in there. It is so in there. And to create new programs, new neural pathways, that takes time and it takes effort and it takes a decision and it takes a commitment. that you will have something different and that you are going to learn these skills so that you can have the marriage that you want and build the legacy that you want to leave behind for your kids of what a healthy and happy relationship dynamic looks like, and that's what we call being a cycle breaker, breaking that pattern that is, generational for all of us. And when we get to a place in our marriage where we're like, I'm so tired of this, I'm so tired of this dynamic, and I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm going to figure out how to do this differently and healthfully because nobody taught me this. When you make the decision to be that person who breaks the generational cycle of dysfunction, you are doing hero's work. That is our purpose when we're here on the planet, is to heal and to break the cycles so that we can help our children usher in the next generation of, healthy minded people who know how to process their emotions. If our parents didn't teach us how to do this, if your parents didn't teach you how, you're not going to know how to do it. You have to learn, you have to learn it. Then you have to start to practice it so that you can embody it. And then the embodiment becomes the new automatic subconscious habit. But that takes time and it takes practice. All right. So last question, how do I emotionally regulate? Really good question. And we're going to share this with you.
The biggest thing you have to do is become self-aware. This is, again, the biggest challenge for most of us because we're operating from our subconscious. When you're self-aware, you're present-based, you're in your mature prefrontal cortex. When you're not, and you're in your stories, you're actually either living in the past or you're predicting and thinking about the future and what events may happen to you, and a lot of times that's from a place of worry and fear. And when we are acting and living from that place, we ultimately begin to create from that place also.
Yep.
Okay. So it's the self-awareness piece is the biggest piece, the most important thing. It's being conscious. It's being aware. It's being in your mature brain when you are self-aware. Okay.
Yeah. When you're self-aware, you are in the prefrontal cortex. Okay. In terms of emotional regulation, yes, the first part is self-awareness. I'm triggered. I'm pissed. I'm angry. I'm furious. I'm sad. Gotta know that you're there. And then when you realize that you're there, the first thing you need to do is you need to go work with yourself. You need to take some time. And the first thing you do, I don't care where you are. And sometimes people are at work when they get emotionally dysregulated, when they get triggered, and can't just go off and be alone for 30 minutes to an hour. Or maybe you're a mom who has kids and you can't just excuse yourself and be like, kids, fend for yourselves, So breath work is number one, no matter what. If you're feeling activated and you feel the emotional whoosh come over you and you're in your limbic system, start breathing. Start breathing. When you can slow the heart rate down to a certain level through, slow breathing and just relaxing yourself, and you can slow that heart rate down, people move from their limbic system to the prefrontal cortex. And they have found this in studies and know this to be true. So it's the breath work and taking deep breaths and practicing breath work that takes us from subconscious to the conscious mind. Okay. So breath work is number one. You've got to do it, and you've got to do it for as long as it takes for you to feel grounded. Okay. And for you to feel better. And then after you get grounded and after you feel better, which might take 5 minutes and it might take 30 minutes, depending on how activated you are, you can start to interrupt the patterns of thought by asking yourself some clarifying questions like, okay, what just happened? You know, what's the story that I'm making up right now? Because we are all meaning making machines, and we have meanings and stories that we're making up when things happen. Mm. Another question is, what are the feelings coming up for me right now? What do I need right now that would make me feel better that I can give to myself? Or what do I need from my partner right now that will make me feel better? But these are the kinds of clarifying questions you want to ask yourself once you come down from that emotional place, to interrupt the old patterns instead of, because a lot of times what we tend to do is we get swept up into that vortex suction of mind spinning, of all the stories and all the emotions, and it just heightens, and we go into parallel thinking and negative thought spins and those kinds of things. So it's self-awareness, breath work, interrupt the pattern with some good questions. And that is the process of emotional regulation. If you are struggling with being emotionally dysregulated and you don't know how to regulate yourself, and you need help with this because your marriage is hanging on by a thread and you guys are constantly arguing, constantly fighting over the same shit over and over again, and you need help because it's not going to get better without it, you can reach out to us. You can give us a call at 678-721-4244 at our office. You can also visit us at therelationshiploft.com to schedule an appointment and to check us out there as well. Feel free to subscribe to our channel, share this with any friends that you have who you think might need it. So,
also, you can reach us on TikTok.
At
the Kelly Vandiver, and also at the Ned Vandiver.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
So stay tuned for our next episode because we have lots of information to share with you guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.